Hi, and welcome to the final day of the New Blood Digital Festival 2021. I'm Stacey, and I'm the Foundation Manager at D&AD. Today's talk is about placing the portfolio review and flipping it on its head, and asking our established industry expert all about their career, their work, and advice for all budding creatives. As such, I'm delighted to shortly hand over to today's moderators, Josh Akapo, and student and co-founder and head of strategy at Archetype, and Grace Lister, student and designer and researcher, who'll be quizzing our industry leader and esteemed designer, Anthony Burrill. The panel will be with you for around an hour, and there's plenty of opportunity to ask them questions via the chat function, which we'll save for the end of the session. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Josh and Grace and the rest of the panel to introduce themselves.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks so much for having us again. And just a quick intro on myself before we get into this amazing discussion today. I'm Josh Akapo. I'm a final year student, just finishing my degree at King's. And I'm also the co-founder of creative agency Archetype. We move at the pace of culture in merch design, digital, and more, and I'm head of strategy there. Also a researcher and strategist, and love all things knowledge and insights. And Grace, over to you.
That was an amazing intro. Trying to take off, that'll be a difficult one. I'm Grace Lister, and I have been graduated from graphic design, studying BA 3-4 years now. And I kind of felt like I was floating around the industry, bouncing from various roles, from designer, researcher, working on various different projects for future-facing companies. And I've been freelancing for a long time, but I knew I really wanted to study a master's, but I just knew there's going to be a few hurdles in the way. One of them being a huge price tag barrier, and another one not entirely sure where to put that non-existent money into. So that's where Make Your Own Masters came in last year, which was founded by Stacey Woolsey, who's hosting today. And it's been an incredible experience, coming to an end pretty soon in the next week, and I'll be forging my own discipline, and that's going to be really exciting. We've got a showcase next Thursday up till Sunday, which we'll drop a link in and you can all come along, and great to see everybody there. Yeah.
Amazing. And today we are flipping the portfolio review on its head, and this is really interesting. And we have the amazing Anthony Burrill here with us today, which is wild for us as students. So would you like to give yourself a little bit of an intro?
Hi, I'm Anthony. I graduated from my MA in 1991. 30 years ago. And since then, I've just, forged my own path really, and kind of worked in lots of different disciplines. I did a lot of work in advertising, and now I've kind of turned into just a sort of, a kind of artist, creative, doing lots of different things, lots of different projects. And and it's great to be here chatting, because I can honestly remember what it was like kind of graduating, even though it's 30 years ago. I can still remember that feeling of like, what happens next? How do I fit in? So hopefully we'll be talking about that today, and my weird and wonderful path through my career.
Yeah, well, me and Josh, we're like-minded in that way, aren't we? We're excited about kind of chatting a bit more and digging deeper into, I guess, also the landscapes of what the industry is looking like today for creatives. And we had a little bit of a chat ourselves, me and Josh, about that kind of jump and trying to forge your own thing can feel quite overwhelming, especially nowadays. So I guess we'd be really interested to see how that would have been for you, and maybe we'll just move on to our first question then. So how would you describe what you do, and what is it you think how do you describe what you do in your work?
I think the way that I describe it now is that I kind of get paid for being me. So I've managed to sort of negotiate a position, over the past 3 decades where I've kind of, people come to me now to kind of do what I do, and it's taken me that long to kind of figure out what it is that I do and how I fit into the industry. But but the industry changes. It changes every year. I know, over the past 2 years, it's changed immeasurably. So yeah, I'm always on a mission to kind of keep the work that I do relevant and connected to what's going on. So I kind of I do lots of projects with lots of different groups, charities and pressure groups, and I still kind of do my own practice as well. And then I kind of work for selected commercial clients. So yeah, it's a real mixture of lots of different things. But that's life, isn't it? You go down lots of different avenues.
Absolutely, and that's interesting that you've sort of noted that the industry is constantly changing, but in the midst of all that change, you're still you, which is really nice to hear, especially from like somebody who, like as you've said, when you remember like how it was to graduate and how it was to feel like, oh, okay, what am I doing next? And so that kind of leads me on to like my next question for you, which is like, what were some of the hurdles to being able to express your creativity when you first started, when you were first graduating, or even before that point? What were some of the hurdles that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think the main hurdle is the lack of self-confidence and a kind of shyness, and imposter syndrome and all that stuff. So yeah, I was completely unsure of what I was doing. It's like I kind of looked at everybody else's work, especially at college, and everyone was doing really interesting stuff, and knew how to do graphic design, and I was kind of, I didn't really know how to do that stuff, and it was kind of, it was just, I think I just had to kind of find my way of doing things and figure out how I wanted to do stuff, and not have to feel like I had to kind of fit into any particular pigeonhole. That the work, I suppose at heart I've always kind of been an artist, or kind of creative, and kind of always had my own things that I want to say, and not necessarily, there was always that tension between working commercially as a graphic designer, delivering other people's messages that maybe I didn't believe in myself. So it was, I think I kind of very gradually kind of began to kind of move away from working purely as a job into something that was more kind of fulfilling and kind of nourishing for me as a person as well. So I think it's just that thing. It's like you spend all this time putting all your energy into the work that you make, and then it turns out and it's just an advert for yogurt, and you're like, is that what it's all about? So I suppose kind of finding a way of being able to work commercially, but then work with things that I kind of believe in, really. So that's what's kind of led me to where I am now.
Did you find that a real hurdle, I guess, like when the understanding of advertising, then when you started out, it just wasn't exactly where you were fitting in, and then forging that for yourself felt a big step? Or did it feel something that you had to do it? It was an intuitive sense?
Yeah, I think you're always kind of guided by the image that you've got of yourself and how you see yourself, and how you kind of you've got a sense of your own potential, and things that you feel that you could do. And it's like, not everybody sees that in you, because you're just some other graduate. Whereas I don't know, it's having that sort of core self-belief, and that real kind of tough nugget of like determination. And I think that's kind of what that's the main thing, is just to be determined and to be persistent. And, you know, we're creatives. We've got to find different ways of doing things and, you know, apply that creativity into, you know, scaling the mountain that we see in front of us. I sound like Gareth Southgate now, don't I?
Rubbing off on you, rubbing off.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then also I guess it moves on to the next question, which is there anything you can show us or describe a project that's really kickstarted your career, really?
Yeah, well, I've got a few slides that I can show. So this is for the Brinker Budget Hotel in Amsterdam. So this was 5 years after I graduated from college. So within those 5 years, I was kind of like making my own little publications and magazines and stuff like that, alongside the other stuff I was doing. And this led me to meet Eric Kessels. So Eric was, he was working in London at the time. He was setting up his own agency in Amsterdam, Kessels Kramer. And he was working with my wife at the time. She was a photographer, and he was working with her on a student travel campaign, and he needed some typography. And Emma, my wife, said, "Oh, I know someone who's good at typography. You should meet Anthony." So I went in with my weird little portfolio, and then that kind of led into working with Eric. So yeah, he was like he was the kind of gatekeeper into the next stage of my career. So this was this campaign that we did together, the Brinker, that was 1997. So the Brinker is a kind of cheap budget hotel in Amsterdam, aimed at kind of backpackers and students. And Eric kind of used it as a means of kind of creating these campaigns that really stood out in advertising. So it was like anti-advertising. It was making a kind of a point, you know, making a virtue out of the fact that the Brinker was a deeply awful place to stay. So things like, you know, the noise and lack of windows and, you know, basic amenities was something that this campaign was built around. So I kind of created a whole set. It was like 20 posters that we made, and it was the campaign was launched, and it got in like Creative Review magazine, and you know, it got seen in those kind of circles, and it kind of really launched me into advertising. So after that campaign, I ended up working in advertising, kind of creating typography and kind of working like an illustrator, really, as much as anything. But yeah, this definitely kind of kick-started my glittering career so far. But yeah, it was funny, and it's like, you know, I had 100% trust in Eric and his vision for the campaign, and you know, he just kind of let me get on with what I wanted to do with the campaign, and you know, the way I kind of created it with you know, cutting letters out of books and sticking down, you know. But this is like pre computers, you know. I was still working on my kitchen table at home. So
yeah. Basically 2020, really.
Yeah. You know, I'm a natural self-isolator. You know, I kind of like to be locked away, just beavering away with bits of type. Really. That's my happy place.
Do you find that? Oh, sorry, Josh. I was just going
to. Oh no, go on.
Did you find with Eric that I mean, as I guess it's with a lot of employers who bring people on, giving them the space to kind of evolve a little bit more with their practice or role that they want to be in? Does that give you a freedom to really make your own way?
Yeah. Well, he gave me confidence. You know, he saw something in me that you know, nobody else had seen. You know. I was kind of a bit crazy and wacky, and kind of, you know, that word was kind of swimming against the tide a bit, really. You know, in the sort of mid-90s, everything was kind of like like David Carson and Tomato, and that kind of slick kind of graphic design. And I was kind of completely the opposite of that. I was kind of super simple, simple typography. And so yeah, Eric kind of gave me the seal of approval, really. And because he was such a maverick in the advertising industry, I kind of got swept along by his gravitational field, and I got to sort of hitch a ride with him, really. And we ended up doing campaigns for Diesel and tons of other stuff, and kind of then he got me involved in exhibitions, and he was like I suppose like a mentor, really. Even though we're exactly the same age, he just seemed to know everything a lot more than I did.
That sounds so interesting, super interesting, especially when you're talking about like the different design styles of the 90s. Because yeah, I mean, although I wasn't alive for the entire 90s, I do remember quite a bit of that aesthetic. The aesthetic was it was a lot more busy, it was a lot less clean. Like serif was still in in terms of type styles, font styles, and like seeing your work, like even the example you just showed of that campaign, seeing the typography styles there, and then seeing how that translates into like later work that you've done, and then how that's like gone on to probably in a big way influence a lot of other typographic graphic designers who work like that. Like even at my own agency, definitely we've sort of pulled from that and used from that. And it's very interesting that like at such a young age you were on the pulse of, like, you knew it was going to go in that direction, or you were just sticking to you and then everyone else ended up also going in that direction, kind of thing. Like how did you, as you were sort of moving through your career into like the early 2000s and you were seeing, oh, okay, more people are going to this kind of style, and then when the 10s came around, how did you sort of find that and how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think I don't know whether it was, I was just, I suppose because I went through to the Royal College, it was, everyone there was kind of, we were just a real bunch of misfits and like oddballs, and like everyone had their own, like in the shared studio that we were in, it was just this kind of crazy collection of lots of different things, like fish tanks and broken guitars, and it's like just this kind of like real mess of different stuff. And I was taught by Alan Kitching, who did letterpress, and I used to go down to the letterpress workshop, and I was just drawn by the kind of wooden metal type. And I don't know, there's, I'm into kind of like the pop art from the 60s, kind of Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns, and their approach to typography. So it's kind of like, I was kind of referencing pop art, I suppose, and kind of, maybe like Fluxus and things like that. So that's the kind of influences that I was looking at. But, back in the 90s, the design world was tiny. There was like, you could fit everyone in a room. There was like, there were a few different groups doing interesting things, but I don't know, I think it was just a time for kind of individualism and individuality in design. And yeah, I was just kind of doing my thing, and it was kind of, it was definitely part of what was going on at the time, but I had my own way of doing things. But yeah, and I suppose because I didn't really adopt digital technology until much later on. I didn't have a Mac, until right at the end of the 90s. So yeah, up until then, I'd just been putting off the inevitable. Really, I was like, oh, I don't need a computer; they're rubbish.
That's pretty interesting, actually. Sorry, Grace, actually.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think that there's a bit of a new wave with individualism at the moment. I think a lot of, or even just the past few years, I've seen a rise in it. And I mean, people do go to you for inspiration in that way. Like, you can see that you've forged a way through that. And it's really, I think them comparisons are fascinating. And yeah, it gives me a bit of hope too. It's nice to think.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think, maybe, sort of within design education, you're kind of funneled into a very particular way of working. And, it's like with a lot of student work that I've seen, everyone, I don't know, everyone same templates and kind of vision. It's like that, that hand holding up a tote bag that everyone uses. It's like
right.
I don't know. It just seems to kind of and I think it's we should all just do our own stuff and not worry too much about how it fits in, or it's like culture's there for us to change and shape and pull apart and kind of we've got so much inspiration now through our screens that it's just that avalanche of information, but it's like how do you kind of stick out in that, how do you kind of create your own thing? So yeah, I don't know the answer.
Well, that's a really good point, actually, because there has been a big boom in sort of especially as of late, the whole young people coming straight out of university or straight out of school or straight out of like junior roles and then going directly into freelancing and directly into building their own personal brands. There's been a huge boom in that. But then also, you're right, when you look at quite a few design stylings now, it's almost like people are pressured into conforming to the norms of what looks popular now. You can see that clearly in Instagram infographics. If anybody's looking at those, they really do not all, but like a lot of them do look the same. And although they are about different things and they are mostly designed by a range of different designers who come from a range of different backgrounds and disciplines and stylings and experiences, but it is almost as though things have gotten to a state where everybody is it's the competition aspect of it has almost gotten so much more important. So in order to sort of stand out, it's almost you're having to conform, kind of. What would you sort of say to designers who are going through the whole oh, this is how I like to design, but this is how the world wants me to design, almost?
Yeah I don't know. I think, well, I feel that pressure as well. It's like, I don't know. Like sometimes you just go through those moments where you just think, what is it that I actually do? And, is it worthwhile? And is it, it's kind of, and I think it's important to have those conversations with yourself and, with people who you trust, whose opinions you trust. And it's like, I don't know. I think you just got to be brave and, just like put work out that you believe in. And, I think there's going to be a real shift moving away from, people solely working for big brands. And I think people are going to work more locally, with things that are going on in, wherever they live, in their own communities, in their own towns, and, with people that they know, on a sort of, as kind of friends, really. I don't know. I think because in a way the world has kind of physically shrunk over the past year and a half. Everything's much more focused on where we kind of live and work, really. So I don't know. I think I kind of feel more of a connection with stuff that's going on where I live now. I'm kind of because before I used to like travel the world and do projects all over the place, whereas now I'm kind of feeling I'm getting much more kind of local, which is a good thing, I think.
I would agree with that, actually. Although that leads to a follow-up question. So I definitely agree with that in terms of things having a more localized approach, people caring more about community and trying to do work more in that. We've definitely seen an uptick in social purpose sort of design stylings and illustrative stylings that has fueled the rise of all the infographics we're seeing on Instagram and that kind of thing. But let's talk about advertising right quick, just because that's literally the antithesis of what we just said. And yet that's also where the money still is for realistically for a lot of young grads coming up or budding creatives coming up in this space. So how do those sort of opposing sides either gel or will one kind of be will basically, I'm kind of jumping to like a future question here, but like I'm just wondering what your take is just on advertising industry as a whole, creative industry as a whole, versus what's happening in grassroots levels. Yeah, sort of institutions versus the local and the community.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's up to, you know, each individual person to kind of figure out how they negotiate, you know, the commercial world, really. But I think basically it should be about working with brands that you feel some kind of natural affinity with, or you know brands that are working ethically and, you know, not like the big nasty brands that nobody likes, you know, the kind of, you know, fast fashion and, I don't know, kind of, you know, banking industry and, you know, like all that stuff that is kind of like adding to the world's problems, really. I think, you know, working with, yeah, just working with stuff that you believe in, really. And I think that's something that, you know, if we all just worked for people who we believed in, then yeah, it would kind of make it harder for those kind of businesses that are unethical to kind of work, really. And I think it's just like yeah, it's just voting with your feet, isn't it? It's like, you know, because you know, it's not just going for I don't know. It's a tricky problem because, you know, I work with tons of brands that I wouldn't even touch these days. You know, but like at the start of my career, I would literally just do anything. I didn't care at all. But I think, you know, the kind of 90s and early 2000s was kind of, it was a different time. You know, we had different values in those days. Things have changed, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, things have definitely shifted in that sense. Like the overwhelming feeling for a lot of, I guess, that tension between trying to get work and, yeah, advertising does have a lot of money, a lot of massive brands do, but we have to think about them questions that where we're going to be when, how's that going to look for us now? And I know that that's something that you've said here as well. Maybe we'll move on to the next few questions because I've just realised that we've got Q&A in 15 minutes. So I guess we could talk about, maybe this is something that we could turn to a positive, even though we are in a little bit of a negative space right now. But how do you think you respond to negative feedback? And does that develop a resilience? How do you develop that resilience?
Yeah, it's like, well, you know, feedback. I don't accept feedback anymore. I just ignore feedback, and it's almost like. But yeah, I used to do like, you know, 20, 30 rounds of changes, and it's like, oh, can you move the type a bit up there? And it's like, you know, it would destroy you and any kind of enthusiasm that you had for kind of working like that. So yeah, I think it's good to kind of like, I think it's all out of conversations, isn't it? And it's kind of like talking with people you're working with, and, you know, kind of managing their expectations about the kind of how you work and things like that. So yeah, kind of these days I just say, this is what I'm doing. I like it or lump it. And I think it's, you know, but in a kind of, you know, in a nice way. But it's like, well, you know, you've asked me to do this project for you, so, you know, I'm going to do it how I think it should be done. So, but, you know, it's taken a long time for me to get to that stage, and but I think it's all about self-belief as well, and, you know, sort of, you know, believing in your own work and you know, standing up for your own work, and, you know, kind of being, just kind of fighting for what it is that you want, really.
Yeah, it is a really interesting point you've made. I guess it also does, that comes from experience, right, which you have just said as well. And I know that, you know, the industry at the moment is people who are starting out are struggling to have them conversations because they think you know, there's cancel culture and you kind of get written off. Books, I get terrified myself of speaking out about when I'm freelancing and maybe it's not gone the way that I thought I was going to get that type of feedback. And trying to navigate that world is really difficult. So yeah, what kind of advice would you give to people that maybe are trying to kind of be themselves and be affirmative in what they're believing in, but yeah, not really shifting massively so that they can still do what they want to be doing.
Yeah, I don't. It's you know, everything is negotiating those kind of those ways of you know, just kind of being okay with what it is that you do for work. You know, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of you know, thinking back on some of the stuff that I did, you know, back in the day, I was kind of like, I don't know, it's just, you know, you kind of, you just do what's necessary really to get you to the next stage. But I think culture's different now. I think, you know, we can, you know, people, especially, you know, in the creative industries, it's full of people with empathy and kind of understanding. And, you know, I don't know, I think most people, you know, most reasonable people are on the same page with stuff, you know, about the changes that we're seeing in society at the moment. But yeah, you just got to say what you think in a nice way, and kind of, you know, pull people along with you. You know, don't sort of create this sort of you know, us and them mentality, because that's, you know, that lies at the root of all the problems. You know, it's like, right, you know, it's about persuading people the way that you want things to go, you know, in a kind of a gradual and you know, positive way.
It's a really good point.
It really is. And yeah, it's kind that does make a lot of sense, but it is also really hard for, like, of course, like as you said, it takes time and experience to get to a stage where that's just commonplace and where that's just practice. But yeah, there's a lot of feeling, especially if we're talking about creative industries. Like there almost is kind of a dichotomy between those who create and those who manage those who create. Now that sounds a little bit out there, but there are, like, creative industries isn't just design, art direction. It is also marcoms, it is also advertising, it is also brand side and people with their guidelines and their identities to protect and that kind of thing. And oftentimes when doing work in those environments, it is so hard to say, actually, no, you don't get any more revisions. Actually, no, this is the way it should be done. Otherwise, I'm just not going to work with you. Or say, actually, why don't we do this instead? And especially in uncertain times, because the last, since, in fact, life is uncertain, but since I'd say 2007, life has just been perpetually uncertain. And especially for younger generations who have only grown up in the uncertainty. Like I was like 8, 9 when 9, 10 when the global recession happened, housing crisis crash in 2007, 8. So and I remember that very well, and nothing has been certain since then. And oftentimes in this uncertainty, there's a lot of the institutions in the industry refrain from doing the stuff that creativity naturally does, which is pushing the boat out, which is challenging the status quo, which is inventing new systems and new ways of doing things. So it's kind of almost like, how do you still do that in your work, especially as somebody who's coming up in the industry? How do you still push the boat out? How do you still challenge the status quo without making enemies, I guess?
I think it's, you know, it kind of goes back to, you know, that thing that we were talking about, you know, us and them, and, you know, those basic human skills of negotiation and, you know, education for, you know, for people. You know, I think we're growing up in a time now that is, I don't know, I think things are much more out in the open. You know, you can have conversations about race and sexuality and politics and environment, and, you know, it's stuff that is out there, you know. And it's like, you know, I remember, you know, growing up, you know, when I was like in my early, you know, teens and 20s, I think, you know, those people didn't have those kind of conversations at all. You know, it wasn't something that was even, you know, on anybody's radar. and even if it was at kind of a very kind of fringe level, whereas now it's it's mainstream. It's like we're kind of we're in the culture wars, and we're kind of we're fighting for what we believe in.
And how did you sort of get to that stage where you went from not having to have spoken about those issues before to now it being like an integral part of what you aim to do, working with charities, working with pressure groups? How did you get to that stage of like, as people online, Gen Z, especially like Black Gen Zs call it, doing the work? In that sense.
So this project, Oil and Water Do Not Mix, this was in 2010. So this was a screen print using oil from the environmental disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's like an explosion on an oil rig, and crude oil, was kind of released out into the ocean. So yeah, if you just go to the next slide, this is the poster that we produced. Oil and Water Do Not Mix. So this was in 2010, and it's the first time I'd made a piece of work that was, had a kind of environmental message to it, and was some, it kind of like it really spoke about a particular issue, and it got lots of attention, and copies of the poster have been are in collections of kind of museums and galleries around the world now, and it's kind of like it was one of those things that just set me on a completely different path. And I think it was producing this kind of work, it was like you can still do stuff with graphic design, and you can still do stuff with visual communication that talks about these things. So yeah, so that was the first time that I kind of got into all this kind of where I am now. And then I kind of working with charities and then pressure groups, and producing work that is kind of connected to issues. But yeah, it was something that was kind of, I don't know, kind of hesitant about getting involved in, because I don't know, you kind of think it's going to affect other aspects of work that you do, but it hasn't so far.
Kind of worked in your favor, really. Like it's pushed you into these areas of what a lot of graphic artists really struggle to do. And I think that's what's really exciting about how it's kind of really set you on this course of where you are today a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can sort of trace back to when I did that, and then it's kind of the kind of stuff that I'm doing now. And it's that thing we were talking about earlier. It's like, I want my work to be relevant. I don't want to just sort of disappear on a little tangent that is, it's like I want the work that I make to have connection with people, and for my ideas to be disseminated, and those ideas are about lots of different things, how to live and how to interact with other people. And so yeah, so I suppose graphic design is the means through which I get my message across, really. So I think essentially I suppose I'm a communicator, and it just kind of comes out through graphic design.
The vehicle.
Definitely.
Would you say, I guess one of the questions that we have thought about is, what would that be one of your most impactful projects, you think? Or is there another one that you can think of?
Yeah, this one. So this was unveiled at the beginning of this year. And I went up to Leeds for the first time last week to kind of see it in person, and to be, confronted by the scale of it. And it was like, yeah, that's, it feels like the right message at the right time, delivered in the right way, and a way that is kind of connected with people. And hopefully, because the message, me and you and me, it's about community. And hopefully, like in 10, 15, 20 years time, hopefully that mural will still be there, and it will still be talking about the same things, and it will still be connected to people. So yeah, it's almost like I've kind of done it now. That's my statement to so yeah, it feels good.
It's really
That's
iconic.
really great. Honestly, yeah, and it the way it's sort of positioned there, like when that was first unveiled, I feel like I saw that everywhere online. I feel like it was in a lot of places, and I think one sort of testament to that, especially like the timing of it during what we're going through now, is that that very message will continue. So that allows the work to just be, it will allow it to be there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, however long, however long, because the message will forever be needed. You and me, me and you, in it together, that kind of thing. And that's sort of what you were alluding to before, with how do we get other people in the industry to also do this kind of work, and to also sort of push the boat out and to and to turn it from making profit to making impact, which is it gets easier to do when you get more experience in the industry. But also there are so many incentives for you to not do that, and for you to like go fully back into advertising and fully just sitting working with brands, because there is just the financial reward is so big there. But it's good, like when you're setting an example like that, and when you're doing some work like that, that it shows younger creatives that, oh, okay, you can be fine, you can live a comfortable life and make a difference and make an impact. You don't have to choose all the glitz and glam and then do nothing, and you can balance.
Yeah, well, I think, it's kind of so from the design for the mural, I've made lots of prints, and people buy those prints and then have them in the house, and it's so that's, and by people buying those prints, they're supporting the work that I do, and they're allowing me to kind of create more work, and kind of so it's because I've kind of created this niche and an ecosystem in and around my work, that it kind of connects with lots of different things. And by selling prints and kind of producing work that people can pin onto the walls, then it connects with like the bigger pieces, like the murals, and then the work that I've been doing with Extinction Rebellion, and kind of it's kind of supports everything. And it's I think people understand that, that by buying a print, they're kind of supporting the work that I'm doing. And it's kind of it feels that's how I wanted it. I've always wanted it to work like that. And I think there are it kind of it shows a model and a way of working that that people can adopt in their own way.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make, like creating an ecosystem around your work and how that connects back to the people, because that's kind of at the center of your work, and then it kind of feeds out quite naturally. And I think that's something which we would all love to be adopted in our practices, and maybe it does kind of go against all the structures that are in place in the creative industry at the moment, the ones which we don't necessarily would want to have continuing.
But I think it's definitely these things come with experience, and I kind of think about kind of thinking back about my career, and the sort of the difference between being in my 20s, 30s, and then it was only until I got to my 40s that kind of things really started to sort of come together. And now I'm in my 50s. It's just like this is like the prime time, and I think you've got to think about your career over your entire life, and how your life is going to change, and the different experiences you're going to have, and relationships, and being in different places, living in different places with different people. And it's I think your work reflects who you are as a person, and it forms your own identity and how you present yourself to the world.
And going with the ebb and flow of that too, and like what life has to throw at us in whatever way that is. But the last year has been crazy in the way it's affected everyone. It's a bit of an understatement, but yeah, a bit of an understatement.
yeah.
Should we finish our last question, Josh, before we move on to the Q&A?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to say I really enjoyed that little 5 minutes between you
Yeah.
two. I was just sitting there like, yep, that was great. I really enjoyed that part.
Good.
But yes, so sort of thinking on to the future, and now there's like sort of two parts to this question. Sort of thinking on to like the future, especially like where it pertains to new grads, new creatives. Um, have you, as somebody who spends like quite a bit of time chatting to new grads and to new creatives, have you noticed that they have any like glaring hurdles that are different to yours as of late?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, it's like, oh, the question that I always get asked is like, what, how did you get into the industry? How did you, and always the answer is just by talking to people and just getting yourself out there and, finding out what's happening. Don't imagine what's happening out in the industry. Actually go out there and find out for yourself what's happening. It's kind of, the industry is run by lots of people who are just like you, who kind of finding things out in their own way. And it's just because people have got a job in a design agency doesn't mean that their life is fully worked out. We're all a work in progress, and we're all figuring things out. And it's just like understanding that you've just got to kind of put yourself out there and be part of the conversation, and just talk to as many people as possible, and get conversations going with people, build relationships. And it's like there are a few graduates from this year who I've kind of been chatting to, sort of like, I don't know, I don't call it mentoring. It's just like having a chat and sort of developing a friendship, and kind of talking about work. And I think it's like with you, Grace. How we met, a few years ago, and I've sort of just been there in the background, kind of, whenever you needed a chat, I was around. So that's, I think it's just about developing those conversations, isn't it? And kind of just making that leap. And it's just people, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, we're all just people. That's all we have to keep thinking.
I do talk in cliches quite a lot.
No, you don't. You do not. It's a good way to see it. It's completely human. We've got a lot of really interesting questions, and lots. So I guess one we could probably ask is, what do you think are the biggest mistakes fresh graduates make when marketing themselves?
Not really. That's I don't know. It's like I think I respond to honesty in work, and it's like people who are just like honest about the kind of projects that they're doing. So yeah, I think it's just that thing of I don't know. Just presenting things in an honest way, and just saying, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in, these are the kind of thing, this is the kind of the world, the area that I want to work in, these are the things I'm kind of passionate about. But yeah, it's just honesty and openness, and just a sort of straightforward approach.
That's good. Clarity, clear, and just try and be authentic, whatever word that means.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've had a couple of questions in about sort of non-designers building portfolios. So whether that's strategists or people who feel like they don't necessarily have all the design knowledge and that kind of thing. And basically just asking like what they should include in a portfolio. What do people want to see from their work? Can they even build a portfolio if they're not a designer, or whatever a designer means nowadays? Yeah,
I suppose with things like that, it's almost like you're kind of building a mood board of things, or kind of describing a simple strategy, or through simple use of language, keep things concise and focused and direct, and explaining your ideas very clearly. It's like this is a subject I'm talking about. This is what I want to say about it, and this is how I'm going to say it. Just those simple steps that reveal your your sort of core idea, and just having a strong, simple idea as well that doesn't need acres of explanation. Keep edit copy down as brutally as possible. Just like people don't read like huge paragraphs of text. It's almost like a couple of sentences. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it.
That is so true. I know that's something I've definitely had to work on in like doing strategy for a few years now. When I first started, I was the longest copy. Everything would be so long, but now you're absolutely right. People don't read the whole thing. Even in articles, I think there's a stat like for past the headline, like you're looking at like 30s-40s% of people who would actually read past the headline, and then let alone past the first two paragraphs. After that, you've lost like 80% of people. So
that's the skill of copywriting, isn't it? Is to kind of get across ideas, super simple.
Absolutely. We've got so many different questions. We've got questions on Grace, do you want to lead on one?
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot of them are really interesting in terms of kind of not being around design, but also very much about the kind of delving into the craft that you're trying to build into, which kind of speaks a lot, I guess, to like where how the industry is today, like people trying to jump into various different roles. But maybe something a bit about your practice would be, there's one about letterpress, and I guess the lack of accessibility towards that at the moment, and are there any tips in how to get into that a bit more?
Well, I was very fortunate to find a letterpress printers in the town where I live in Rye. So I think it's, I don't have my own personal letterpress collection because, that's like a massive investment to do that. But I think there are practitioners and studios and workshops all over the place, and I think it's just a matter of maybe finding like a local kind of letterpress workshop, or I know that they're quite few and far between, but there are good places around. And then you can, I don't know, it's kind of like working using analog means. There are ways of working. You can use a kind of a scanner and a printer to kind of like print out alphabets and cut out letters and stick them down, and do it completely off-grid, analog, old school. Cut out stencils and paint and draw type, and it's kind of, I think there are so many different ways of working that it's just a matter of kind of like figuring out your way, and if it's relevant to what it is that you're trying to say as well. It's kind of just because you set a bit of type in letterpress doesn't give it any extra meaning. It gives it a kind of means of production, but is that production linked to what you're trying to communicate? So I think it's just it's just figuring out those things, and having different ways of working is really interesting.
Absolutely. That was really interesting to hear about, because I don't know that much about letterpress or general type, but it just sounds expensive in my head. But that's absolutely brilliant. I think we might have time for just another small one, but there's a couple questions there about like balancing commercial work versus your own work. So what would you say to like students and grads who are thinking about, oh, I want to freelance here, but also I really have this passion project that I'm so invested in, but it might not pay the same as like freelancing for a brand?
Yeah, well, I think just do that balance. Something, maybe you work for a couple of months and then have half a month off where you're doing your stuff full time, or maybe a day a week where you kind of creating your own projects. But then by doing that stuff, you kind of feed in your creativity, and you've got more strings to your bow. So it's like, if you maybe working in tapestry or rug making or something like that, but then applying that with typography, or a kind of crossover between different creative disciplines is always really interesting, and how your sort of creative life feeds into what you do for a living. You want that to be completely connected. It's like, you don't want to kind of think, all right, I'm at work now, so I have to think in a particular way. It's almost like you're using the same brain to do all these different activities, so it should be, it should all be kind of interlinked and kind of connected. So yeah, so whatever your kind of side project is, that can link back into your work. And then for me, my kind of side project was letterpress printing, and then that kind of became what I did for everything, really. So it's kind of yeah, that's how it can each different bit of your life informs every other bit.
That actually reminded me of something which came up in a conversation that Josh and I had last week about side projects with D&AD, and I think that that's been something that gets asked in interviews to a lot of recent graduates, of like, what's your side project, as if that's an expected I guess rite of passage, but actually in the current state of things, it's not exactly what we need. Like we need space to kind of look after our well-being, and just, if we've got a full-time job, we're not going to be able to juggle another 2 projects. But what advice would you maybe have to find in that little niche for yourself? Is it carving out a hobby that becomes creative just for a couple of hours a week, or just, what kind of advice would you give for that?
Yeah. Well, and any of those, I think, doing something different that kind of takes you into a different space, and maybe it's that working with your hands, or kind of playing a musical instrument or something like that. Something that, or for me, I like riding a bike, and kind of just do. You're doing something different, physical, with your body, and it just it kind of releases different chemicals into your brains that kind of have a different effect on your what you're thinking about. So I think it's sort of, whatever it is, even if it could, it's, I think maybe it's just something that takes you into a different place. But then watching a film, or just staring into space, it's like those are like all good things to do with your time. Just kind of just sit quietly and just look at clouds for half an hour. It's like, it's just kind of giving yourself time to do stuff like that. And to the outside world, it might just look like you're sitting on a park bench, but it's part of your creative ecosystem, all that stuff.
Sounds good. Sounds blissful. I'm sold.
It really does. Same. But yes, I'm afraid that is all the questions we have time for. Thank you so much, Anthony. This has been like a brilliant conversation. I literally, every time you're speaking, I was just thinking, this is yeah. So thank you so much, and thank you, Grace, as well, for co-hosting. It's been great to go back and forth and ask different questions. And thank you all for watching.